I really just want to kind of drill down on the impact of a father being present. I'm presuming, as you say, it's not everybody's story, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
maybe growing up, maybe even as a adult, young adult, or super grown up, whatever it is, like there bound to be people in your circle that didn't grow up in those same
yeah,
circumstances. So
yeah.
have you been able to kind of pick up on um, the let's start with the positive things. What's the positive things that you think you've gained from having your dad in your house, or being raised
Yeah,
with your dad as a
yeah,
present person in your life
yeah.
that you can identify?
Yeah, I think definitely, as I kind of touched on before, there was something about him role modeling. Yeah, so
Mm,
his presence being there, seeing him get up and work. Now, my dad, it's funny because people talk about, when you start talking about people who are academic and all of that, different images get conjured up for people. People start to think about a whole raft of qualifications and
mhm,
doctorates and titles and labels
mhm,
and all of that. And my dad wasn't that guy. He wasn't that guy, but my dad is very intelligent. If you ever get a chance, bro, look up something by, if you haven't already heard about it, called Multiple Intelligences. Yeah, right. It's by a guy called Howard Gardner. Right. He's an academic. I think it was back in maybe the 60s or late 70s. He came up with this idea around multiple intelligences. Yeah, and it's the notion that we all have different forms of intelligences. So
mhm,
normally when you go to school, you're trained to believe that, most intelligence is around your cognitive processing, mathematical equations and reasoning and IQ. That's what we often see it. But
right.
actually, this guy Gardner, he talks around the multiple intelligences. Some of the things he touches on would be like how we see in the current day. We would talk about EQ, emotional intelligence. He
Mhm,
talks about other forms of intelligences that
right.
people very much excelling in, but may not have been recognized or
Uh-huh.
amplified within the education system. So
Yeah.
my dad has a wicked ability to memorize and remember. Listen, bro, if we sat down there, we was to go through some kind of general knowledge quiz, the man will kill us. He'll finish
Mm,
us, bro.
yeah.
Because when it comes to certain dates in histories, man can tell you the time, who was involved, the
Mhm,
date,
mm,
whatever. He's like bricks. So a lot of my education when it came to the Black UK experience came from my dad. My man
right.
would tell me about the Brixton riots, the Deptford fires, yeah, the
Okay.
Deptford fire, the Battle of New Cross, and all that. I was learning from my dad. Do you understand?
Mhm,
The Michael X, who was the equivalent to Malcolm X, and what happened to him, and how the man killed. All of this, my dad will tell you. Your brother's name as well. That was a big scholar at the time. He used to do something called Devil. I think it was called Devil's Advocate. Brother from Tottenham
uh,
still.
what's his
I've
name?
forgotten his name, but you know who
So
I'm
right.
talking
I know
about.
exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, his
I can
name's
see his
gone.
face as well.
Yeah, he's
Um,
part dark as how.
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So dark as how and all them things there. My dad was schooling me about them
Mhm.
and everything from time.
Yes.
So I think I guess that's my second point. I'd say my dad is a very intelligent man, and I feel what I really admired and got from him is just seeing how he maneuvered and his ability to retain information and his interest in dates and key activities and
Mhm.
social activities and challenging injustice. Although he wasn't out on the front line marching, he very
Yeah.
much was a historian. I'll call my dad a historian in that
Mhm.
regard, you know what I mean? But yeah, man. So I think I got a lot from him, particularly when it came to when I was doing certain projects. If I came home and I
Right.
was like, Dad, I'm looking into politics, I'm
Mhm.
researching this, it will go, right, I can get Labour's manifesto for you. And so you could defy, I'm like, what's a manifesto? Man's breaking these things down and
Yeah.
pledges. So I think there was something about his informal schooling and education of me that
Okay.
mad love and respect for him, I think, for his presence there. Also, just like I said, being reliant and dependable, I think that was something I came to see over time with my dad. Do you know what I mean? His ability to educate me about relationships as well. My dad was very much against all this domestic violence and gendered-based violence and all of that. My dad made it very clear to me. He's like, bro, let me tell you something. He goes, I don't want to ever hear of any physicality or violence towards a woman, right? I don't want to, you don't own no woman. You have no right to put your hand on a woman. You have no right to abuse a woman or speak ill. So don't, none of that. That's straight. Right? None of that's here. So, and I saw that through how he interacted with my mum. Do you understand? Yeah. And I saw that respect and that there. So there was a lot that I picked up from my dad. But I think, like I said, he modeled a lot of stuff. Modeled a lot, seeing him doing things. You know what I mean? So definitely, those were the strong positives for me. You know, and I'm sure there's many more.
Of course.
Yeah.
What would the first thing you said was about like almost like the informal teaching, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I've thought about as well before, especially just like you kind of having friends in the same circumstances, or not the same, but similar circumstances of you kind of having their father in their life, and I'm growing up in the same, we're friends and whatever. So, you know, you just kind of observe somebody in a situation that maybe you're not in. And I feel like that is a very, what's the word? I don't want to, maybe I'll just say it anyway. I feel that's a very male way of imparting knowledge, is that kind of, or attempting to impart knowledge in an informal way, and not understanding that it can be a trigger to a male or to a person if you're telling somebody what to do, or telling somebody that the way you do this is the wrong way, and I know a better way than your way to do it. I feel like a better way to kind of approach that problem or approach that challenge is to informally teach them by either having a conversation about the subject, or showing them, or doing it yourself and asking them to help. Or I feel like that way of approaching a problem, I feel like is a amazing tool in fathers that I've seen's toolbox. And that sounds like what you're kind of describing.
Yeah. But don't get it twisted. He had his moments where man very clearly, let's not get it twisted.
Yeah.
There were times where my man's like, yo, that needs to be done that way. And I don't want to hear nothing. And I'm like, yo. And he's like,
I hear you. But there's a time and a place for everything, you know?
Yeah. Definitely. He was like, it was certain, I feel, and even to this day, my dad he believes there's certain ways to do things. Do you understand? So I think he still feels I'm like some little 12-year-old kid running around him, because sometimes the way he bads me up about certain things that he feels should be done in a certain way. Do you understand what I'm saying? But yeah, definitely. And that's just going to be pops, man. That's just how it's going to be. You know?
Just kind of almost like the flip side to that question. Like what kind of, let's say the less good or the negative sides of the specific dynamic between you and your father, in the same way, like, how can I say? Yeah, let me just leave it as that rather than trying. In the same way, you got the positive side, the negative side.
Yeah, I think the negatives were definitely, I feel in a way, what I saw, definitely coming into like my early 20s. Because what happened was, because my mum died when I was 18, so I'm an only child, and I grew up with both my mum and dad being present, right? Both of them were there in my life. And I was very close to my mum in particular, very close to her, And with my dad, I think definitely what I picked up on, I think because of the absence of the emotions, because he wasn't able to voice some of his concerns and his emotions as well, I think it became difficult. I think there was that slight distance between us. So when my mum died, he was like, look, obviously it's tragic what's happened, but I think my dad, for him to move on, he had to be busy, and he had to just jump into action. So it's like certain things have to check. We're going to have to do certain things. We're going to have to, change tact on certain things. Things aren't going to be the same. We've got to sort out your mum's stuff. We've got to do certain things. And I
Yeah.
think he, the first time I ever saw my dad kind of cry or get emotional was that night in the hospital when my mum died.
Mhm.
And that's the first time I'd ever seen any real kind of grief in his
Mm.
face, or anxiety, or man was just, yeah. And I remember seeing him, and it was, I didn't know what to make of that. Do you understand?
Yeah.
Because I've never seen it before. I've never seen
Mm.
it before. And
Yeah.
like I said, this is me at 18. So yeah, so I think the real, that it comes back to that emotional side. And I feel I think my pups could have been, and I get it, it was absent for him, but it wasn't really present. And I feel um now looking back on things, it would have been great if, I think there were other opportunities to kind of get him to voice how he was doing and feeling. And that
Mhm.
would, I think, would have enabled me to kind of do the same. Do you understand? So I
Mhm.
think definitely what I was yearning for was that emotional connection. And I feel when you don't have that, you start to try to seek approval in different ways. So I thought, okay, because I don't have that connection, maybe man's doing well in his studies, I'll get that approval. Do you understand? You
Mhm.
try and substitute or find other ways
Yeah.
to kind of meet those needs, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It does. It does.
Yeah, yeah,
It does. Just to kind of piggyback off that a little bit, when we're talking about approval, so where you've kind of that emotional connection or them
yeah,
those that understanding of the feelings of your father are kind of absent or difficult to kind of gain, right? Did that kind of was that something that then you felt some level of apprehension to even approach? If it's was it a conversation that you attempted and was kind of shot down from, or did it build a
yeah,
kind of person that just made it where
yeah,
my dad's just not going to talk about that, so I'm going to quell that desire in myself to
yeah,
have that
yeah, yeah,
conversation
definitely,
and just not
definitely.
even approach it? Okay.
Yeah, 100%. Because like I feel, like I said, as you said before, I'm a conversationalist. I like
Yeah.
to talk to people. I'm
Mm.
interested in reasoning and connecting. I've always had interest in people and culture, you know, and that's in terms of my studies.
Hmm.
That's what it was all about: anthropology and studying culture and
Right.
kinship and family ties and all that. Something I'm very passionate about, particularly when you look at the African diaspora as well. I'm very interested in looking at family structures and family institutions, yeah.
Hmm.
And I think with my dad, he definitely, I think there's an aspect of my history that I felt was missing, that I was desired like to know more about, which
Hmm.
for my dad wasn't really a big issue for him. You
Uh-huh.
know, so I'm the guy that wants to know, well, we're in Barbados, where we from? What was it like in that part of the parish? Who
Uh-huh.
was around? From a colonial point of view, what was going on for the island? What's the island's history? That's how deep I will go with things. And
Hmm.
my dad's just like, he ain't interested. Like,
Yeah.
man, don't wanna, not interested.
Just know
And
if it
then
was all that good, I would have stayed there. I'm come here for a reason,
right,
and I could now I want
exactly.
to build a little holiday home and go back when I feel like.
Right,
That's
right.
what.
So right. So all them that there, why are you bothering me with them things? I don't want to hear about that. So
Yeah.
that was frustrating at times, because I know, I think when I started to mature, to really get an interest in that, my mum was taken from me.
Right.
So now I'm like, the person I have to rely on is my pops, and he can't even be asked. But then
Hmm.
at times there was little moments where I could get it. So he would talk about his experience back in Barbados, where like when he was at school and fights used to kick off, and them man are waiting down the gully, like them man are waiting to get into it. He would
Yeah.
talk about if there was more than one of them, how they used to carry rocks. Like
Hmm.
they'll just rock up in their shorts when they're coming back to stone a man when they
Yeah.
get into it, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how the man were going on. So he was telling me that, and then in that little moment, I'm like, I've got to seize my opportunity now to ask
Yeah.
further. You get me?
Uh-huh.
But then he'll get distracted, and then the conversation's dead.
Okay. Okay. So at least, so yeah, that's interesting because I always think, um, when if you're around somebody that is, I don't know, emotionally distant, maybe that's the right, maybe that's the right
Yeah,
term. Um, does that is that it takes a certain kind of person to almost stand in their truth over the long term and still and risk almost alienating that person rather than it just being there, them being uncomfortable. Now it's like they're almost resenting you for poking and prodding at maybe an uncomfortable part of themselves. Does that make sense? So I feel like a lot of people then will just kind of quell that in themselves and say,
yeah,
he's not going to be, or he or she's not going to be comfortable talking about that. So
yeah.
I just do without.
Yeah, and that's the thing. But then I guess we need to be curious as to know why that's the case. Do you understand? I
Right.
get sometimes it's hard because to be rejected or to be feeling that you're not getting something could be difficult to come back from,
Uh-huh.
particularly when it's your loved ones, because they're the ones that hurt the most. Do you
Yeah.
understand? But where what I'm realizing is actually maybe for some men, I feel we've never. I mean, let's be real, bro.
Yeah.
Sometimes when a men really ask properly about their opinions or about their views or how they feel, when a men really ever question
Mm.
about that or ask or invited to explore that, that's why when we hear this chat about how they say men don't talk and we don't chat and we don't reveal our emotions, I believe man hasn't been given the opportunity to more
That's
time because an
facts.
assumption has been made that we
Hmm.
don't want to do that. So when that's
Hmm.
projected onto you, that projection becomes your truth. And you
Yes.
start wearing that like a jacket. Man's just like, yeah, you
Yeah.
know,
It's
talking
fair.
about, I don't want to talk. I don't want. So for me, I always knew, I think, from my dad. And now as I've gotten older, I see little glimmers. And like I said, I'm getting more out of him now about
Yeah.
that. And he
Hmm.
seems, as he's getting older, I feel he's more open to that.
Yeah. I I hear that. I hear that. And also as well, mate, as you're getting better at knowing, because sometimes when we're young, we kind of we knock down walls with a sledgehammer rather than with
Yeah.
a hammer and chisel, like that.
Yeah. Real talk, man. Real talk. Definitely, there
Yeah.
was their moments there, man. Your balls dropping that, and then you wanted to try test him and all
Yeah.
of
You
that there,
just
and all them things there.
feel like you can question big people and that, and no matter how big you
Yeah.
are, to them you're not big people ever.
Real talk. Real
Like that.
talk.
All right, no, that's no, I appreciate you for sharing still, because yeah, that's I've got a deeper understanding of you, obviously, but just definitely a deeper understanding of that, like you said, that dynamic of a father raising a son,
Yeah.
being black, being in London, being in a city, all of these
Yeah.
dynamics, all of these are contributing factors into why and how he interacted with you the way he did, and you interacted and you responded to his interaction in the way you did. So it's all proper
Yeah.
interesting to me. Um, all right, just to change kind of speed a little piece.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about your the professional arm of who
Yeah.
you are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
obviously, first I'm going to touch on like where we met is your platform, the Lounge Academics
Yeah.
platform. Um, so yeah, it's kind of interesting the where the conversation's kind of gone. It's kind of talking about like your love of debate, your love of conversation, your love of exploring people's or yourself, your own and other people's emotions, and that is, excuse me, that is kind of how I perceive that Lounge Academics platform, especially
Yeah.
especially like in its current form as like the podcast and that kind of thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
its original form of like that
Yeah.
the events and the debate forums and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell me maybe how where that originated, where that spark came from,
Yeah.
why
Yeah. Yeah.
your why.
So with Lounge Academics now, actually, it's funny because I in school in the educational system I really struggled. So I never had any kind of formal diagnosis of dyslexia or anything like that. But
Hmm.
I didn't really. I would call myself. Well, people would say they may use the term slow learner, but I would say I was more of a thorough learner. I'm a guy that wanted to really take in and really understand things. So if you were showing me a new phone or something and you're going, yo, okay, yo, I want you to buy this phone. I'm like, well, what's the phone going to do for me? What features does it have? How's it going to appeal for me? I'm that kind of guy. I like to question and think things. Some people may say that I overthink things. Do you understand?
No, I hear
I'm
you.
definitely a thinker. So for me, going to school, I struggled at school big time. So I struggled with, although I wasn't an unruly kid in the sense that I didn't misbehave, I was relatively a good child at school, both in primary and secondary school. We had our little fights and whatnot, like anybody would, but I don't ever recall being excluded or expelled or anything like that from school. So generally speaking, my position in school from a social point of view was one of, I guess, kind of like compliance. I was kind of cool in school. However, I did kind of struggle academically. So with the kind of teaching that they put down and the classes and the curriculum, I couldn't engage with it. So my mum, who was very much about self-learning and independent thinking and independent learning, was very quick to get me into, I mean, it was a part of my being, you know, Saturday school, going to Saturday school, learning about my history, learning about African ancestry, learning about who I am and the UK context was big. So to buffer, the supplementary school system was big on my agenda for my mum. So she invested heavily in me going to Saturday school, and I had a private tutor as well. So she was a woman of color that was there, you know, to help me and support me. And the thing for me is what I picked up on, they helped me to really get through. I got my GCSEs, I literally got through, I scraped, I got my A to C's and I got through. But what I noticed was I wasn't inspired or stimulated from that environment at all. This also extended to college and even university. I went to uni and I was like, I'm here, but I think I was perpetuating a cycle of expectation. The family wanted to see that photo moment, do you understand, with the scroll.
Yeah.
So I think it was the graduation pictures that I was going for to please the fans. But when I look back on it, did I learn anything great? Like in terms of like my knowledge, I think not a lot of it, but some of it would be redundant now because things have moved on. And I guess for me, what I was always interested in was debate and discussion, and Lounge Academics for me provides a vehicle to find a creative way to explore education and to learn. And I think for me, when we talk about learning, images come up of teachers dictating and talking at, and you must do this. It's this banking method. And I don't believe in that. I believe knowledge acquisition is in our people. Like right now, I'm loving this conversation because already you've shown me things from myself from just reflecting and mirroring back some of the things that I've said when I'm like, rah, like I'm like, it's interesting you say that. For me, I'm like, rah, I've noticed something about myself that you've noticed. So for me, I love debate, and I feel knowledge is created through that collaboration and that shared knowledge. And I think that's what Lounge Academics is about. So Lounge Academics is about providing people the opportunity to come into a space and reason with one another, whether it's you and me talking, we may have an agreement on one thing, but we may disagree on others, and that's cool, as long as I'm willing to seek understanding as to why you have that position, because I might be a better person as a result of that. Do you follow me?
I definitely do.
That's the core, man. That's the core of what it is, but it came from, for me, the lack of having that, because I was afforded that in my home. So between my mum, my dad, my cousins, I was able to have those kind of discussions about who I am. But I'm noticing that's not very prevalent amongst other families. Like, you know, particularly from the African diaspora, I'm finding that we have debate and discussion, but sometimes they're for the wrong reasons, and often it's in reaction to certain things. But I would like us to create a space to be proactive, where we can learn, but also sharpen one another, you know, in a way that is nourishing and collaborative.
that's powerful, and I feel like that's why. Let me give her the shout out anyway. That's why I'm glad my sister Naisha
Yeah,
introduced me to the platform and invited me down, and from there, we built our friendship, and
yeah,
that's what brings forth to this and other things that we're going to be doing in the future, and all of these
yeah,
things.
definitely, man.